A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters and children. Very nice to meet with all of you one more time. We have so far discussed a few things. We have discussed that we got this Quran from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we discussed that the content of this religion is kitab, which is the sharia, the law, and hikmah. Hikmah is the wisdom, and Quran interprets this as iman and akhlaq, etiquettes. And it's been explained in many areas of passages of Quran which we have reviewed. Then we said both of this iman and akhlaq and the sharia, the law, we got this in the shape of Quran and Sunnah. So Quran has sharia, Quran has the law, and it has the etiquette and the iman, and then Sunnah has both of these things as well. Then the next question was, how did we get it? How did it get to us? And we had a huge discussion about consensus and perpetuality. We said that we have received all of our religion in its entirety through consensus and through perpetuality. We got Quran through perpetual recitation. Every group of people who have received this Quran have been memorizing. Some of those people have been memorizing it and passing it on without any changes. And every day, without any broken chain, this has been recited. Then we talked about Sunnah, and we said that we have received Sunnah from perpetual practice. We got this through consensus, yes. In addition, we got this through perpetual practice. Okay. And then we talked about isolated report, which is hadith. And we said that hadith do not add any content to the religion. We said hadith do not subtract anything from the content of the religion. Instead, it explains it. It elucidates it. Okay? That is the sphere of hadith. And hadith is, technically speaking, in an academic world, something called isolated report. Isolated report. All right? Meaning that transmission chain has not reached the level of consensus. You cannot say that everybody agreed that it has got onto them. So you just cannot say that. So that's why it's called isolated report. And for isolated report, I found this funny video, and I would love to watch it with you guys. So let's do that. So let's have a little bit of fun. So we're going to watch this video, and then we're going to talk about it. This is like one of those telephone games, and he has to pass on the message to the guy in front. Okay, all right. So when people have these isolated reports, they keep passing on from one person to another person, and then sometimes they add their own stuff in it. And by the end of it, maybe, there are huge differences between what was initially presented and what was later on. Now, I'm not saying this happens all the time. It was just for fun, this video. But I hope it just kind of gets the message across of the issues sometimes you can have with isolated reports. Any questions? Okay. All right. So why do we need to understand Quran? We need to understand Quran because we call ourselves Muslims. We have been blessed with this amazing religion, and we should understand it. No matter what religion we are born in, we should understand that religion. We should understand what it calls for. We should understand what it teaches, because how else are we going to have more faith in that system? And number two, how are we going to talk to other person about our faith, right? So that is the biggest reason why we need to understand it, just for our own learning. Now, we are going to be learning the fundamentals of understanding Quran in a little bit more detail, and just want to let you know that there are 3 levels of learning. So one level of learning is the common folks, right? So before I indulge into this study, or let's say 10 years ago, my source of religious knowledge was what? Hearsay. I would hear things from people. I would go to a Jummah khutbah, I would hear things. I would go to my class, and they would be teaching Islamic studies, and I would hear things there. I would study some of those things formally, some of those things I wouldn't. I would just be like getting information from bits and pieces all over the place. So this is how common folks are. All of us are in that position for a lot of other things. Now, if you look at the community around you, not everybody is a doctor, but people who are not doctors still have some medical information. They have some bits and pieces of medical information, and they use those medical pieces of information, engineering piece of information, IT pieces of information to run their lives, right? When they have a very technical question, obviously then they will go seek help, but they do have some information regarding those fields, okay? So that's what the common folks are. Then the second category is students and teachers. Then you can learn something properly, learn the sciences behind the knowledge, learn the rules of the knowledge based on the work of the people who wrote those principles, okay? So there are people which are in the category 3, which are people who discover these rules, right? So not everybody who teaches science is Einstein, correct? Right? Not everybody is Darwin. Not everybody is a big philosopher, right? So there are people who make discoveries in their own field, but not everybody is like that. So people like me and people like you, I'm hoping that we will review what original people who have discovered things have said, and formally learn the real knowledge. Not just because I heard something, but because we want to understand the truth. We want to learn the truth, correct? So when you're doing so and you're reading Quran or you are reading any book, what you would love for you to have is somebody to tell you what you're going to learn, what are the different landmarks, what are the different small goals that you would like to keep in mind so that you do not deviate from the message completely. For example, if you are reading Harry Potter and somebody do not correct you that this is a fictional novels and all these are fiction, maybe somebody can read this and be like, oh wow, at some point in time there lived people who could fly in the air and there were magical kingdoms, etc., right? I'm sure nobody will fall for that, but I'm just trying to get the point across that if you have a little bit of help, then it will be easier. You could disagree with those landmarks with one person, but that would be based on his or her observations, as they have tried to make things easier for you. It's like when you are studying Quran, these are the things you should keep in mind. Quran is this kind of book. When you're reading Quran, it's going to talk about third person, it's going to talk about second person, and this is the context. This is the history behind it. This is the audience of the Quran. These are all very important questions. And that context and those landmarks can be very, very useful. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be studying those landmarks. So when you study this, you are not going to reach wrong conclusions, because that has happened. That has happened. So let's try to read this next portion. And I'm just going to start reading here. This is based on the principles of understanding the Quran. And today we're going to go through the first principle, which is appreciation of the classic Arabic. Quran has been revealed in the classic Arabic spoken in Mecca. It was spoken in the age of ignorance or age of Jahiliyyah by the tribe of Quraysh. No doubt the Almighty has endowed it with inimitable eloquency and articulacy in the Quran. Yet as far as substance is concerned, it is no different from the one spoken by the Messenger of God, and which in those times was the tongue of the people of Mecca. So, Quran, before we understand this, let's try to learn a little bit about the Arab culture. And let's try to learn a little bit about the Arab even before Prophet ﷺ, right? So, Arabic language was spoken in Arabia and its suburbs, and the Arabia is not Saudi Arabia, it's way more beyond Arabia, which was 1500 years ago, as we were talking about. It's a wide area. And at some point in time in the history, Arabs were the leader, the world leader, just like United States you could say is the world leader, or before that the British were the world leader, with all the colonies and stuff. They were the world leaders at that point in time. For example, the Babylon, one of their rulers was Hammurabi. And you can look at it, this was almost like 2,000 years before Jesus ﷺ. He had a huge empire, and he is known primarily for pioneering the law, right? And so at that point in time, in the land of Babylon, I apologize, I'm going to switch this off. In the land of Babylon, he has a huge territory, and Mecca was a very prime area in that time. There were trade routes from Yemen that were going all the way up to north, and so there was a lot of traffic, financial trade, etc., that was going through Mecca. So even before Islam, even before that point in time, Mecca had a very big was a very big place. It was a cultural center, it was a financial center of the Arab, and probably that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed it to have Kaaba. Right? That is probably why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had asked Ibrahim alayhi salam to devote one of his children, Ismail alayhi salam, to be the caretaker of that area, and he had his descendants in that area, right? And because of that, Quraysh came into political power. They were the descendants. And so now all of this is happening in Mecca, right? So Mecca is being the cultural center, they are the financial center, now they have the political power because of Kaaba. And their language was Arabic. Okay? Their language, those people living in that area, it is their language, that is Arabic, and Quran was revealed in their language. Quran was revealed in their language. So you be like, I already know Quran is revealed in Arabic. What are you telling me? What are you trying to tell me? Now what I want to tell you is that the language is not a constant phenomenon. Language is not stationary. Language has evolution. Language goes through different stages of evolution. So for example, the words, the idioms, muhavarat, the patterns, they are not similar in one era as compared to another. Not necessarily. Okay? And there may be quite a difference between two eras, let alone the same era. Sometimes the language is not even the same in the same era. Two different set of population which are contemporary would be speaking totally different dialects or styles of the same language. Dialect is another thing. Dialect changes from one place to another, and the way sentences are formed are very different. The way the structure of the sentences can be very different. For example, English, Wales, Ireland, the southern states of United States have a very different language than the southern states, right? The dialect is very different. Where they stress on a word is very different. What kind of words will they use in their vocabulary are very different. So that's one element of this language. One element of this language is when you're trying to decipher what kind of language, Arabic language that Quran was revealed, that's one conundrum. That's one problem you have to solve. You have to solve what kind of language did, Arabic language did Quran got revealed. The second problem is, even today, Brother Hassan, Brother Ubair, they're doctors. Sarah is a doctor as well, and you guys are from different professions here, IT, engineer, etc. And you guys, when you are writing something, you write things very differently than how you speak. And the way you speak to your colleagues is very different than when you speak the same English language with your children. Isn't it? So even different forms of the same language in the same locality can be very different. All right? So there is, for example, medical English. Medical English is very different than, for example, the English that lawyers will speak to each other. The English that is spoken in the cricket commentary is very different than the English, for example, that is spoken in soccer commentary or rugby, etc., etc. In addition, societal factors also come into play. So rich people speak English in a totally different way. Their style is different than people, for example, will be from a low socioeconomical condition. Plumber is by no means a disrespect. Plumber just means that, different professions have different languages that they use. So we need to determine what specific Arabic language was the Quran revealed in. I hope I'm able to make that point understood. That language changes, and the sentence formation is not necessarily the same. So for example, this is a joke I shared with Dani a while ago. It's like 19th century, when you have to say, who are you? You'd say, how art thou? Who art thou? Right? In 20th century, you would say, who are you? In the 21st century, who that boy? Who him is? Right? So I mean, it's just, things change. Things change in a language on how you express. The words may not change. Now in this situation, you have this word art and thou, which are no longer used. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sometimes the same words are used, but the way they form a meaningful sentence is very different. Okay? So listen to this guy. He's
I've been working on accents. I'm an expert at accents. And I've been working on the United States in general. So I've been doing the southern states, like Alabama and Louisiana and Texas. I could do any city. I could do any region, anywhere in the South now. So if you name a part of the South, I can do it.
Oh my gosh, we'll do Louisiana. I'd love to hear it.
Louisiana's here. That's more here. Louisiana, that's got a kind of rounded. It's got a kind of round, there's something kind of regal about it. Louisiana. Where else?
Switch it up for you. Arkansas.
Arkansas, that's got kind of more percussive. Arkansas is kind of, it pulls back after the consonant. So Arkansas. It's a very, thank you, you're very percussive.
Based on
Yeah.
no.
Expert. To the town. To a part of this. Now Tennessee's got, they're thinking. Tennessee's got a thought. They're thinking about it.
So you get the point. The point is that there are differences in the same language, even in different set of population. And so you have to, for academicians, for historians, it's a big and important question of what language did Quran reveal in. Like you can say it's Arabic, fine, it's Arabic. But Arabic that used to be there 1500 years ago, is it the same Arabic today? Right? And one would say, well, maybe the vocabulary hasn't changed much. Or maybe vocabulary, when I say vocabulary, the same words may not have changed, but other words have been added to Arabic language from other languages. And the structure sentencing, how does a sentence form, is also something that has changed. And if you don't keep that in mind, it will result in big problems. Okay. Some people argue Arabic was probably the oldest language. Some historians argue if Adam's alayhi salam's language was Arabic. And there's a closely related language to Arabic, which is Aramaic, right? Which is possibly the language in which the Old Testament was revealed. And so they joke about this, that Nuh alayhi salam, his grandson had a little bit of stuttering in his voice, and so that was actually the language which he was speaking. That stuttering Arabic was actually Aramaic. But that would tell you how old Arabic is. Then there are two kinds of languages in the world. You guys are very familiar with this idea, hopefully, is that there are these phonetic languages, and I apologize, I don't know the exact term in linguistics of what this is called. I tried to research this a lot, but I couldn't find it. So I'll explain it in my words, which is there are two kinds of languages. One is the phonetic languages, and the other is languages formed from amalgamation. Okay? So for example, the old languages, the really old languages such as Arabic, such as Sanskrit spoken in India a long time ago, Chinese, Tamil, these are really old languages. These are languages that are formed from the sounds. Okay? Versus there are languages which are formed from the borrowing different words from other languages. They're not necessarily, let's say, the original languages. Okay? So for example, English is a great example. English is a great example of that language. So we know that the Anglo-Saxons and from the Denmark, from the Netherlands, from the Germany, those people actually moved to the English island a long time ago. And I'm sorry, even I can't read this on my thing, but this is taken from Wikipedia, so you can just go there and do a lot of research on this on your own. And this will tell you how it evolved. So English, for example, is an amalgamation language, right? So it took many words from different other languages, and it kind of evolved over a long period of time to become the English as we know. Similarly, Urdu. Urdu means lashkar, which mean army in English. And army means that the people in the subcontinent, when they were actually invading India, their armies were from, let's say, they were Persian speaking, they were Turkish, they were Arab speaking. And when they came in and they resided and kind of corroborated with the local community, that's where a language was formed from different words from different areas. Okay? And so that's what that concept means. So Arabic is a very old word. Language is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes credit for this. Right? So, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that one of His signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the diversity of the languages and your color. Okay? So why am I saying this? Because people don't write grammar books first and then people start learning language. That's absurd, isn't it, Turan? Right? Languages are formed first. People start learning languages first, and then people start to know, oh, look, here's a verb. This is a noun. This is a subject. This is an object inside of that. All right. So that is how these things are formed. So people first start speaking, and then other people observe the kind of similarities in the speech and comes up with syntax and the grammatical rules, etc. Now, because Arabic is a phonetic language, that is why you can't look for a word in Arabic. If you want to look at the Arab dictionary and you're like, oh, I'm looking for ard. So I'm just going to go and find alifra, ard. Like, that's not how you can find any word in Arabic. If you ever have used this online dictionary of Arabic, you will know it's impossible to find any word like that. Okay? So every word in these phonetic languages have a root. And first you must find its root. Only then can you find the meaning of the word. Okay, you'll have to find that root first, and then asma, for example, names, right? And then you will have to samia, so hearing, and so there are different kinds of roots that you have to know. So let's get to the crux of the matter. If somebody learns today's Arabic, and they learned it, and now they are able to write in today's Arabic language as well. They are able to write a little bit. Or if somebody is born in the Arab lands we know of today, let's say somebody is born in Saudi Arabia, somebody is born in Iraq, etc. And then he thinks he shouldn't have any difficulty understanding Arabic because this is the same language. And the answer to that question is no, it is very difficult. It's going to be very difficult for him or her to understand Arabic as well. Okay? Even today, it is considered an honor for any poet or writer to be told in Arabic, oh, your work resembles that of Quran. Your language is so high, it is actually as close to the Quran as we can get, humanly possible. So Quran impressed people for centuries. Its words are continuing to be used in the Arab culture, in the Arab language today. None of the words used in Quran are forgotten. None of the words used in Quran are unused today. Okay, so that's not happened at all. But the manner of the spoken words, how is a sentence formed, how does a dialogue take place, has changed tremendously over time. Okay, and this is also unnatural to maintain that that style, because all the other cultures are evolving, or other people and traditions are evolving, and their languages are evolving, and so it would be unnatural for Arabic to stay the same, and that is what happened. It has changed a lot. So we're going to travel a little bit back in the history and talk about Shafi. Well, Shafi is he was a very big scholar in our Islamic literature, and one of the school of thoughts belongs to him. So he was from Mecca. Ancestrally he was from Mecca, and here's this. He was like 767, so you can say probably a century and a half after, 154 years after the Hijrah, right? That's the kind of timeline on that. And he wrote 2 books. One is called Ar-Risala, which means the principle, and the other book he wrote is Kitabul which is about fiqh, applications of the principle. And in Ar-Risala he has a big chapter, and that chapter argues that Quran is in Arabic, right? He says Quran is in Arabic. And so, but what he's trying to argue over there is that Quran is in that Arabic. Quran is in the Arabic that was sent, but to who? Quran has been revealed in the classic Arabic spoken in Mecca. It was spoken in the age of ignorance by the tribe of Quraysh. That's the language. That's the language that we have to understand the Quran in. Okay? You cannot understand the Quran. You should not try to understand the Quran in today's Arabic language. Why? Because this is not the audience of that book. The audience of that book were 1500 years ago. Okay? So this age of ignorance, let's try to solve this mystery. Age of Jahiliyyah or Zamana-e Jahiliyyah is a very common Urdu word we use, but Jahal in Arabic means not just lack of knowledge or ignorance. Like, sometimes we call people Jahil. Like sometimes Sarah calls me Jahil, right? I don't know, she doesn't talk to me like that. I'm sorry. It's just to, lack of knowledge or ignorance is one meaning of Jahal. But that's not the only way they used it in Arabic culture, okay? At 1500 years ago, they also used it to talk about their bravery, to talk about their enthusiasm, to talk about their honor, okay? So that's how they have a very famous poet, his name is Amr bin Kulsum, and he wrote a stanza, and I'm not going to butcher the Arabic, I'm just going to tell you the translation, which says, no one should try to show us Jahiliyyah, okay? No one should show Jahiliyyah against us, because we are the biggest one to show Jahiliyyah among all the Jahilin. Okay, so what that means is that we are brave and we are very emotional people, etc. So what does that mean? What does the age of Jahiliyyah mean? In a time when people did not make decisions based on logic or knowledge, but rather based on the prejudices of their tribal traditions, sentimental excitement, and historical background, like tribal background. That is called the age of Jahiliyyah. Okay, this is referred to the time before Prophet ﷺ received the book. All right, that's what it's called. So when you hear the word age of Jahiliyyah, it's by no means a condemnation of that society, or we're trying to berate them or condemn them. That's not true. Okay, this is a literary language, and this is what that means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used this word in the Quran in a few places. إِنَّمَا التَّوْبَةُ عَلَى اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ السُّوءَ بِجَهَالَةٍ. It is upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive those people who do something wrong in excitement. Okay? Not because of lack of knowledge. The lack of knowledge is not the meaning here. It's like somebody is passionate, and then that passion, moment of passion that they committed, do something wrong, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive them when they ask for forgiveness. Okay? So that's the meaning of that. It doesn't mean that Allah will forgive people who do something in ignorance, like not knowing. That's not what it means here. So similarly, in another place Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ahzab, وَكَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and tells them and the women is that do not do makeup or do not come outside of your houses, be in a state as if the women were in the age of Jahiliyyah. So for example, in the age of Jahiliyyah, some woman would come outside the house and she would be wearing a ton of jewelry, and she would say, oh, I'm showing off this jewelry because my husband gave it to me last night, and this was like $2 million worth of jewelry. Look, so that's what that means. So that is the word Jahiliyyah. Is that's what that means. Ummiyin is another word you will listen often. Ummi, right? Wixen. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent to the Ummiyin. So what is this Ummiyin? Let's look at this as well. I know we're taking a little bit of tangent here, but Ummi was a kind of a, you could say, derogatory word, or a kind of a word, maybe condemnation, or just to kind of differentiate themselves from the local Arab. But this was a word that Bani Israel, the children of Israel, would call the Arabs. They were their cousins, and unlike their cousins, they themselves, they were getting books left and right. All the time they were getting prophets. In fact, sometimes there would be 2 prophets in the same generation. And so they would be like, oh, you guys don't know anything about these prophets, you don't know anything about these books. We on the other hand, we get these books, and we are the chosen people, right? So to differentiate themselves from them, they would call the Arabs Ummiyin, which literally means illiterate. That's what that word literally means, but that is used contextually to refer to the Arabs. Okay, it doesn't mean that those people were totally illiterate or they didn't have any good qualities or something. Okay, so now you understood something. Quran has been revealed in the classic Arabic spoken in Mecca. It was spoken in the age of Jahiliyyah by the tribe of Quraysh. No doubt that Almighty has endowed it with inimitable eloquence and articularity in the form of Quran. Yet as far as the substance is concerned, it is no different from the language, from the one spoken by the messenger of God, and which in those times was the tongue of those people. So what does that mean? Right now when you read an English book, right now when you read a medical book, that is not written in your language. It's written in some language, somewhere, and it is quite literary, isn't it? It has technical words, you have to learn it. That's not the language you use to communicate to your son or to your wife, correct? But Quran was not like that. Quran was sent in the language of the local people. If you say hello by saying, hey, and that's what Quran says. If you say bye like, bye-bye, then that's the bye-bye that Quran will say. It is exactly in that local language that they spoke. Okay? The language, the local people that they spoke. Okay. So what does that conclude to? What is the purpose of this discussion? Consequently, a correct understanding of the book, what book? Quran, is dependent on the correct knowledge and true appreciation of that language. It is essential that a person who wants to reflect on the Quran and attempts to interpret and explain it should be a very good, competent scholar in that language. Okay? He should also be adept in appreciating its styles and linguistic features, meaning the features of the language, so at least the language is not an impediment to him in understanding the Quran. Does that make sense? Two things you need. Correct knowledge and true appreciation. And it's a very tough task. It's a very tough task because you can be a good Muslim, you can pray 5 times a day, you can be very muttaqi, you have a lot of iman, but you may not have appreciation of the language. Right? Not everybody has that natural inclination. Not everybody wants to play chess. Right? Now if your life depends on playing chess, and you don't want to play chess, well, you're not going to become a very good player, are you? Right? So, similarly, to understand this book, you must have a very good attitude and appreciation of that language, and then you must live in that time. Like I once met this history professor, and she was teaching like 1700 era and all of the problems at that time. So imagine her life. I mean, one of her biggest tasks is to live in that time. Live in that time. You have to put yourself in a time capsule and take yourself in that time. Imagine those problems. Imagine the language then, the